Hi, I'm Deboki, and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I'm just going to be doing a library check-in where I go over what I have checked out from the library, what I've read already, what I'm in the middle of reading, and what I am hoping to get to. So all of these books behind me, not the ones on the shelf, but the stack of books on this table, that's what I currently have checked out, and it's definitely more than I'm going to be able to read in the next few weeks, but I guess today we're gonna just be sorting through these piles and seeing like where I'm at and where I'm gonna be, hopefully, within the next few weeks. One of my main goals that I have been talking about throughout this year is that I really want to be reading more fiction that isn't romance, and my biggest obstacle for that has actually not been romance, it's been nonfiction. So a lot of the books that I have behind me right now are books that I am hoping will help me towards that goal. They are fiction books. There's only like one romance, I think, in there. But the main issue is that even though I keep going to the library and telling myself, do not look at the stack of new nonfiction books, like just don't do it because you're gonna pick them up, I still keep doing it. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the nonfiction. There are 4 books. There were 3 this morning, and then I went to the library to pick up a hold. The one that I picked up this morning is We Don't Know Ourselves by Fintan O'Toole. This is a personal history of modern Ireland. So I picked this up because of a combination of 2 things. One thing is because I had read Say Nothing about a month or so ago, and it just got me more curious about Irish history. Northern Ireland obviously is like the focus of that book, but just more curious about Irish history overall. And then the other factor is that I had seen this book probably just like on a list of new releases. I'm guessing like maybe like a New York Times list or something. I'm not really sure exactly where, but those 2 things came together and I saw it and was like, okay, I'm gonna put it on hold and we'll like hopefully read it. I am unfortunately not crazy optimistic about my chances of getting to it before I have to return it, just because it is a new release, and unfortunately the library that I am borrowing this from apparently wants me to return it on time, which is kind of a bummer. I mean, I get it. Other people want to read the book too, but just because I know what my reading schedule is going to be like for the next few weeks, it's going to be a little bit crazy because I've got like some travel and I've got all of these other books that I want to read too. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to read all of this book. I think my goal is going to be to read at least a few chapters and get a sense for it, and then to decide maybe, do I want to like buy it? Do I want to check it out again later? Do I want to get audiobook? Like just kind of make a plan based on the first few chapters of this book and see where I want to go from there. The next book is Pipe Dreams by Chelsea Wald. This is the urgent global quest to transform the toilet. This was a total impulse pickup from that new nonfiction stack of books that is at my library. I saw it and I was like, a book about toilets? Yes. I would like to read it if it's about the history, if it's about toilet technology. I want to know about the public health side, and I just kind of feel like toilets are, I don't know, they're the intersection of so many things in our lives, in our history. So that's why I picked it up. I don't know if this is going to be sort of like the situation that I talked about with the last book, where maybe I'll read it a few chapters, decide where I'm at with the book, and kind of decide based on that what I'm gonna do. Like, am I gonna check it out again later when I have more time to read it? I think I'm just gonna have to read a few chapters to decide where this book is at for me. Maybe I'll just be like, hey Nicole, we're gonna read this for a nonfiction book club. We're gonna talk about toilets for an hour. Another total impulse pickup from the library that I should definitely not have picked up, but I knew as soon as I saw it that I was going to pick it up. This is True Story: What Reality TV Says About Us by Daniel J. Lindemann. This is a sociological perspective on reality TV. And there's just nothing about that doesn't appeal to me. Like I saw this and I knew immediately that it was coming home with me. I am increasingly getting kind of consumed by meta narratives and meta analysis around reality TV. Like obviously I have always read analysis of reality TV since like the moment that like I started watching reality TV, like reading America's Next Top Model recaps and stuff like that. But like obviously we're now at a point where the buildup of that kind of conversation has gotten to the point where we can now analyze the conversations. So I have just been really fascinated. I just finished listening to this amazing podcast series called Unreal. It was put together by BBC4 and they cover a lot of UK and US reality TV series. The podcast is a mini series, so each episode focuses on like one particular topic / kind of like genre, or sometimes even a specific show. And like uses that to talk about like, you know, maybe ethical issues in reality TV, like the storytelling styles, a lot of different aspects. And it's just very well done, like clearly done with both a lot of affection for the genre, but also like a really clear critical perspective on it too. So I would definitely recommend that podcast. And I'm really excited to read this book to see how it fits in with a lot of the topics that they talk about in that podcast and just kind of stuff I've seen people talking about related to reality TV overall. And then my last nonfiction book is Not All Diamonds and Rosé by Dave Quinn. So again, we are very much in the reality TV world. We are specifically operating in the Real Housewives space. So I have already started reading this book. I'm about maybe like 20 to 30% of the way through this book. Each chapter is focused on a Real Housewife franchise. First one is, of course, Orange County, the original. The second is New York City. Third is where I'm currently at is Atlanta. So I'm just assuming that we're going to be going through each franchise, and the oral history is just a combination of the producers, obviously Andy Cohen, and then also some of the Real Housewives themselves. So they're just kind of going chronologically through each of the series and breaking down what happened and kind of giving the oral history version of that, which I gotta admit, I think it's a little meh as a format. Like, I'm clearly like gonna finish the book and I'm gonna not regret a single second spent on it because I love Real Housewives and will always sit down for, you know, people who have been through the Real Housewives talking about their experiences on the Real Housewives. But I just, I don't know. Oral histories in general as a pop culture format, like a pop culture dissection format, are always a little bit like whatever to me because there's just not a lot of analysis in them. It's just really people sharing their experiences without much more context given. So as a format, I just always find it a little shallow in the end. Like, it's a lot of fun to read, and it's not that you can't get stuff out of it. Like, I can definitely see myself citing this book in the future when I inevitably, you know, launch into like a 5-paragraph diatribe about the Real Housewives and, you know, whatever topic that I have connected it to that has nothing to do with the Real Housewives except that I have decided it does. So I definitely see myself enjoying the book for all of that, but it's just, again, as far as that kind of meta content around reality TV, it's just, this book just feels like reunion part 10 for all of these series. And I think when it's at its most interesting, it's when the producers are talking about their experiences. When it's just the Real Housewives recapping their experience on the show, it's just very like, well, like, I've seen the show and I've seen your experiences already. So unless the Real Housewife themselves is like expressing any kind of changed perspective or talking about behind the scenes stuff, otherwise, like, there's just not much I'm getting from the fact that they are telling me about what happened on the show that I couldn't just get from watching the show. So that was the nonfiction. I am now moving on to the fiction books, most of which I haven't read, but there's like 1 or 2 books that I have either read or I'm in the middle of reading now. So first up is Bullet Train, which is by Kotaro Isaka, but it was translated from Japanese by Sam Melissa. So I basically checked this book out because I am easily influenced by movie trailers, and I saw the movie trailer for Bullet Train and was kind of like, okay, train full of assassins, I am intrigued. Yes, premise of the book is it's a train full of assassins who don't know that that's what's going on. They don't all board the train thinking like, hey, I'm getting on a train with a bunch of assassins, but that's what happens. And each of the assassins has like, you know, their own point of view. It's like very much a book where you're seeing a lot of different perspectives come together and you see all of their little mysteries intersect and you kind of realize there's something weird going on, like some kind of underlying reason why they're all on the same train, and you're waiting to find out how that's all going to come together amidst a shit ton of violence and ridiculousness. Like, these are some silly assassins. One of them is like known as being like super unlucky. Another one is like obsessed with Thomas the Engine. I did really enjoy it. I'm also not entirely sure that like this is going to be a book that sticks with me for a long time, but I do think the part that's going to stick with me the most is kind of this feeling of this book being very kind of curious about generations and how generations deal with like nihilism or just like any kind of sense of living, I guess. There's very much a sense of like some people who are young and kind of fully indulging in a sort of nihilism to the point of violence that in a book about a bunch of assassins kind of stands out. It's kind of, it was just interesting to see that translate through these different perspectives that we're getting as these different characters interact with each other. I will say that now that I've read the book, I'm weirdly, I don't know that I'm particularly excited to see it as a movie. I know there's a lot of talk right now about adaptations, especially with the Persuasion trailer that came out. And in general, I am not a fan of being super purist about like adaptations from books into movies or TV shows. I think it's really boring when people are like, you know, mad about the fact that things get changed because, I don't know, that's kind of part of the fun. At the same time, this feels to me, at least when I watched the trailer, there's something about some of the choices that are made, especially with regards to casting and stuff, that I don't know that I am immediately going to be super excited about, super receptive to. So I don't know that I'm going to watch the movie. Maybe if there are really good reviews, I'll change my mind. But for now, I think I'm just going to stick with the book and be content with that because it was a good kind of thrillery reading experience. Next up is the book that I am currently in the middle of. This is Trust by Hernan Diaz, and this has been very interesting. I'm not super far into it, so I think my sense for entirely what it's about is still not very much come together. So going into it, what I was told is that it's a book about the super rich, like New York people in the 1930s, and basically the book is really playing with perspective. There's sort of like an idea of a book within a book in this book, then a book within a book within a book. Sorry, I'm saying book too much. But the idea is that there's this main couple that is super powerful in 1930s New York City, have gotten really rich, I think, off of stocks and stuff. And the book is unpeeling all of the layers around the narratives around these two characters, like the stories around how they came to power, what their personalities are. The idea going into this book is that it's kind of peeling apart the way that those narratives have been built. And I have so far really enjoyed the way that it's built up these two characters that it's centered on, the central couple within the story. So I am excited to keep reading it. This is very much not the usual fiction that I've been reading in the past year or so. So I think it's like a good way for me to get out of my usual fiction reading. I've definitely realized in the past few weeks that one of the things for me with romance that I am increasingly leaning towards are romances that are heavily character focused, as opposed to romances that like are primarily concerned with the plot. So for example, I kind of think of The Love Hypothesis, which I didn't particularly enjoy, as a book that was focused on the plot events at the expense of any real consistent characterization or really kind of fleshed out characterization. At least that was part of why I found it so frustrating to read compared to other books that I've loved recently, like Delilah Green Doesn't Care, which to me had, you know, maybe not as much going on plot-wise. Like there's definitely some hijinks and stuff, but it's really, really kind of focused on the characters. And I used to think of myself as someone who primarily read books for plot rather than for characterization. I don't know if really what I'm reaching is a point where I'm starting to find the right balance of the two, or what is for me the right balance of the two. And this to me is a book that feels very curious about characters in a way that I think is kind of a good thing for me right now to see sort of how that, I don't know, fits in with my overall reading and to kind of shake things up for me in a way that's still sort of pushing me to kind of explore the parts of fiction that I haven't like necessarily engaged with as much. I don't know if any of that made sense. Hopefully it did. I'm going to keep reading this book and find out. So next up we have The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, and this is a gothic fiction book, which is basically all I need to know to want to read it. This is a new release, so excited for this. And I think in general, like, this is, again, if we're thinking of like me kind of branching out from romance, like this is sort of like what I consider like slightly a step out, because I have read plenty of gothic fiction before and I like love it. And so I kind of consider it in that category of like genre fiction that is my first step out from romance that I'm always willing to take. So I am excited to take that step. Like it is like a smaller step out, but I think with how like kind of stuck in a rut I've been with my reading, like even taking that one step out is good for me. I think related to that is my other book from the stack, which is Kaikai by Vaishnavi Patel, which is a new release that a lot of people have really loved. This is a retelling of an epic that I grew up with, the Ramayana. It's from the perspective of basically in the epic, as I always heard it growing up, the evil stepmother who kind of sets a lot of events into motion. My one misgiving with this book, and it's not really this book's fault, it's definitely definitely not this book's fault, and it might really be my fault, is that I'm sort of in a weird place with this tendency in a lot of like fiction and stuff right now in particular, to kind of do these re-examinations of villainous female characters. Not because I don't think it's worth doing. Like, obviously a lot of these villainous female characters have very misogynistic origins, and the Ramayana is like got its problems. We can talk about the fact that I did not know the way that Sita's story ends because I read the children's comics version of that, and my mom had to break it to me that like it does not end that way. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. But basically, yeah, like definitely you don't need to trust like that these stories were written with a healthy love for women and their many complexities. So in that vein, like I am definitely on board with the idea of re-examining these stories. It's just that there's something about it that sometimes for me gets to a point where I just want to be like, let shitty women be shitty. And I don't know that like this book is, you know, contrary to that goal. And at the same time, like I'm saying that like let shitty women be shitty, but also like I think what we're all really just looking for is not necessarily for women to not be villainized, but for their arcs, whether villainous or heroic, to be written with like a sense for like what an actual human woman is like, not just like this kind of flattened version of womanhood and like flattened version of femininity or whatever it is that like easily gets turned into these dichotomies and tropes that have really made reading women characters, particularly women characters written by men, so frustrating. So that's a lot of me rambling, and it's not really a cohesive set of thoughts. It's really just kind of this loose frustration with our need to do this that isn't necessarily a sign that we shouldn't be doing it, which is why I would like to give this book a chance, because yeah, a lot of people have really loved it, and so I want to read it. And you know, having grown up with the Ramayana, I just kind of feel like I have to. This is my one romance novel. This is Paybacks a Bitch by a Witch. Payback's a Witch. That's what it's called. It's a pun. Get it? Okay. Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper. Sorry, I was pretty sure it was Lana Harper, but for some reason the library covered up her name with their sticker, which I think is a little bit rude. I kind of get it though, because like the artwork, there's like artwork down here and artwork up here, so it makes sense, but still. Anyways, this is my one romance novel that I'm going to read because plenty of people have loved it and I want to read it. I know it's not Halloween, so like some of the witchiness is going to get lost on me. That's fine. I don't need seasonal reading. I can just get the book when I finally get it from the library and read it. Technically, this is a romance novel, but I'm considering it not a romance novel in the sense of what I'm really looking for, which is that it is, you know, Sense and Sensibility. It's by Jane Austen. It's probably part of the romance canon that has birthed romance as a genre, but it is not a modern day genre romance novel. So I feel like it's at least getting me out of my reading habits. So I have checked it out because I was just walking through the stacks and I was like, why not? What's probably going to happen is I'm going to hunt down the audiobook and just listen to it and then go back and forth between listening to it and reading it. I have found listening to Jane Austen on audiobook to be super helpful just because I sometimes have trouble getting the rhythm of her writing correct in my head. And so listening to it does a lot for helping the dialogue and the characters kind of all make sense to me. But I also like to have the print version for me to also refer to, like if I want to go back and forth. So that is why I have checked this out. Next up is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which I've never read. I don't know how. Like I know of it. I know loosely what happens. I actually think this might be a lot of fun to do as a paired review with the Hacienda, just because they both got that gothic-y feel to it, I think. So we'll see if that actually ends up bearing out and if I end up reading both of them, because I think that could be a good pairing to do. And I haven't done a paired review in a while, so that would be fun. Next up is Let's Not Do That Again by Grant Ginder, and I'm pretty sure I read a review of this on NPR probably, and that's why I decided to check it out. This book is about a fictional family. I think the mom is running for office, and my sense is just that it's supposed to be a funny book. And I think basically what I was really drawn to from the review is just the description of it as some like a book that was just going to be a lot of fun to read, but also like, you know, about family, about politics, which are you know, endlessly complicated, endlessly a source of inspiration for plenty of books. But yeah, I don't know. It just sounded like a fun book to read. I don't have a lot to say about it beyond that. This is, you know, if we're talking about books that I wouldn't usually think to pick up, I think this is probably one of those kinds of books. So it felt like, just based on the review, kind of a great combination of something that is in the wheelhouse of stuff I've been like engaging with media wise. Like I mean, when I say that, I make it sound fancy. What I did is that I watched Veep finally. And so, you know, I feel like I'm at a point where, you know, books about people running for office is kind of funny to me. So that's why I picked it up. And then last is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I had read an Agatha Christie book earlier this year. It's probably one of the few non-romance fiction books I've read. And so I have just been trying to pick up some more. And by some more, I basically mean I picked up this book. Because I know of it and I know that it is one of her classic mysteries. So I figured, why not go there next? I think this is probably one of my lower priority ones, just because I know it'll be easy enough for me to get to another time. Whereas a lot of these other books, like, they're both more unfamiliar to me in a way that I feel like I need to, I don't know, make an effort on. And also, like, some of them are books that if I return them to the library, having not read them, I know I'm gonna have to wait a while before I get them again. Whereas, you know, Murder on the Orient Express, like, between all the libraries in our system, I'm sure there's a copy somewhere. So those are my books that I'm going to definitely read eventually. At some point. And some of them I will definitely at least read like 2 or 3 chapters of, just to kind of get my bearings straight, just to kind of figure out where they're going to fit in with my reading. And some of them I might not get to right now, and I might get to them later. But yeah, that is my library check-in. If any of those books are things that you've read or things that you think that I should definitely be prioritizing, trying to get to sooner, or if you would dissuade me from reading some of these books, definitely let me know down below. And yeah, bye.